Chapter 25 Amphibia and Reptilia. The most obvious derived character of this clade is four limbs used for locomotion in a terrestrial environment. The tetra means four, while podon means foot. Although many tetrapod lineages have secondarily lost one or both of their limb pairs and/or they have been modified into flipper or wings, tetrapods are part of DNA custom clade most closely related to the Sarcopterygi and sharing derived characteristics with them, including strengthened limbs, muscle within limbs, and a swing bladder or lungs connected to the back of the toes or palate. Terrestrial Habitat. The terrestrial environment offers some challenges and provides some improvements in the physical conditions or abiotic conditions with which life must contend and to which it must adapt. This includes the four opportunities which are the greater abundance of oxygen, warmer habitats, a difference in viscosity, and sunlight availability. Disadvantages include abundance of oxygen. Air contains 21% of oxygen while water is exceptional if it contains 0.0008% of oxygen. Then, warmer habitats. The terrestrial environment has portions that are much warmer than the greatest proportion of aquatic environments. Next is the difference in viscosity. Air is much less viscous than water, making it much easier to move through air than water. Lastly is sunlight availability. Sunlight is used by some organisms through photosynthesis as an energy source to produce food. These are the disadvantages of the four opportunities mentioned. First, abundance of oxygen. Although air contains more molecular oxygen, or O2, air is very drying. The disadvantage of warmer habitats is not only are major part of the terrestrial environment warmer than aquatic habitats, they are much more variable in temperature. Next is the disadvantage of difference in viscosity. Water provides about 1,000 times more buoyancy than air. Therefore, air provides little support of the body. Lastly is sunlight availability. Its disadvantage is it has a drying effect and damage to biomolecules such as DNA. Furthermore, water provides a medium through which sperm may swim to eggs to achieve fertilization. Air provides a drying medium and does not support the movement of unprotected sperm to the egg. And air dries unprotected tissues and cells such as those of respiratory organs, sperm, egg, zygote, and embryo. Sensory receptors adapted for aquatic life are not well adapted for the terrestrial environment. The origin of Amphibia and Reptilia. The bones and limb muscles of Sarcopterygi provided an innovation in the structural variability upon which natural selection could act. The result has been the evolution of support structure for the terrestrial body. The air sacs connecting with the pharynx and paired internal nares provided a respiratory surface that was an invagination rather than evagination. This reduced respiratory water loss and providing a surface appropriate for the exchange of gases in air. These adaptations were aided by the double circulation of the Sarcopterygi, which separated oxygen-rich in oxygen-poor blood, increasing the efficiency of oxygen distribution to the body tissues. Sarcopterygi and early tetrapods showed little adaptations to the problems of terrestrial fertilization and development. The problem was avoided entirely by returning to an aquatic habitat for fertilization and development. Sarcopterygi and early tetrapods show a similarity in shoulder structure and skull structures. In early tetrapods, the general anatomy included a limited number of digits, fingers, and toes, with 5 becoming the standard for most extant species except in most modern amphibians and birds. These are the three groups of tetrapods. First, the temnospondyls. Second, the lepospondyls, followed by the last one, the Anthracosaurus. The lepospondyls and Anthracosaurus are more closely related to the Amniotes. reptiles, and the two groups that evolved from reptiles, the birds and mammals. Although controversial, one interpretation of current data includes Amphibia. Amphibia includes frogs and toads, salamanders, and caecilians. Terrestrial adaptations include skeletal modification to support the body in air. Next is lungs as opposed to gills in the majority of adult forms. Then, limbs associated with a well-developed musculoskeletal system. The last one is sensory systems adapted to air. However, because their skin is a major point of water loss, they depend upon returning to water for fertilization and development. And many larval forms use gills as their respiratory organ. At this time, it is unclear if this amphibia is a monophyletic or paraphyletic group. However, it does contain all extant species of amphibians, none of which occupy a strictly marine habitat. Amniotes. Amniotes are a monophyletic group containing organisms with improved adaptations to the terrestrial environment as compared to the amphibia. They show a complete break from an aquatic environment for reproduction and development, although many have secondarily adapted to marine environments. Examples are red fox and Dimetrodon, which are cyanopsids, and bald eagle and leatherback sea turtle. These two are sauropsids. Next is the amniote. The primary shared-derived characteristic is a series of membranes surrounding the development of embryo called extraembryonic membrane. They include the amnion with fluid bathing the embryo, the allantois, yolk sac, and enclosing the others, the chorion. The outmost layer of their egg is a porous shell, leathery in reptiles, hard and brittle in birds, and variable in mammals. Although most extant mammals do not have a porous shell and retain the embryo without shell within the uterus. Other derived characteristics include internal fertilization. This is done by the penis or cloaca. Ventilation of lungs by negative pressure formed by the contraction of rib muscles surrounding the thoracic cavity, and for some, posterior muscles such as diaphragm and thickened waterproof skin. The available evidence suggests that the amniotes are most closely related to the Anthracosaurus. Anthracosaurus were more completely adapted to the terrestrial environment than other taxa of vertebrates lacking extraembryonic membranes, including the Amphibia. The fossil record shows the first amniotes were small and lizard-like in their appearance. Their adaptive vegetation led to three patterns of skulls: the Anapsida, Diapsida, and Synapsida. The first of these is the Anapsids, which do not have openings forming an arc behind the eye orbit. The Diapsida skull has two openings behind each eye orbit, while the Synapsida have a single opening behind each eye orbit. The only extant group within this clade is the mammal. Note that muscle used in raising the lower jaw pass through the skull openings. The appearance of these openings in the amniotes may have allowed the adaptive vegetation of these groups to fill a variety of ecological niches with different food sources. Reptiles, except birds. Reptiles have traditionally included snakes, lizards, crocodiles, alligators, and turtles. However, they share a number of derived characteristics with birds, and the evidence shows reptiles are a paraphyletic group without birds. In fact, the crocodilians and birds are monophyletic groups and are therefore in a clade apart from the other amniotes. As a group, the reptiles are homeothermic ectotherms, meaning they use heat from the environment to regulate their body temperature and have behaviors that maximize heat gain. They have claws on their digits and, except for turtles, possess well-developed teeth. They are covered with thickened layers of a unique reptilian version of the protein keratin on the epidermis that forms scales. Note that these scales are quite different in their origin and structure from those of fish. They are epidermal as opposed to the dermal scales in fish. Reptiles have a more complex nervous system than amphibians, although their brain is relatively small compared to the other amniotes. For instance, lizards and snakes have well-developed olfactory organ in the roof of their mouth. Reptiles have a more complex nervous system than amphibians, although their brain is relatively small compared to the other amniotes. For instance, lizards and snakes have well-developed olfactory organ in the roof of their mouth. Reptiles also have a more efficient circulatory system with 3 or 4-chambered heart and higher blood pressure than amphibians. This is more efficient in conserving water. In addition, they also have a dry, scaly skin that protects from water loss due to the presence of a number of lipids embedded in the epidermis. Marine reptiles have secondarily adapted to the marine habitat while retaining their terrestrial shared-derived characteristics. They include a single lizard, the marine iguana of Galapagos Islands, more than 65 species of sea snakes, the saltwater crocodiles, and the American crocodile, and 7 species of sea turtles. The marine iguana is probably the least reptile of the marine, while the sea turtle is the most. Iguanas primarily enter water to feed, while other species may only return to land to lay eggs. According to David Attenborough, reptiles and amphibians are sometimes thought of as primitive, dull, and dim-witted. In fact, of course they can be literally fast, spectacularly beautiful, surprisingly affectionate, and very sophisticated.